Thank you for joining Jennifer Shelton and Associates in our 2019 Webinar Wednesday series. We're coming to you live from downtown Washington, D.C. Our webinars are every Wednesday, and you can find the upcoming schedule on our website. Past webinars and all recordings are also on our website and on our YouTube channel, along with over 160 other recordings on federal contracting topics. All are complimentary. If you have questions for our speaker today, you can email him directly with the contact information you'll see on the last slide. All right, this is just a little bit about us. We are a Washington, D.C. based firm and provide services to federal contractors. This ranges from market analysis reports to go-forward writing and also post-award compliance. More information is on our website, so please visit us there. We do offer newsletter advertising, so you can reach us at this email if you'd like more information on that. All right, let's go ahead and get started. Our speaker today is Caleb Everest, and he's going to be covering leveraging a PEO to stabilize wrap rate. Thank you for joining us, Caleb. I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to you.
Great, thank you, Mallory and Jennifer Schaas and Associates for the opportunity to provide this overview today. And we will be focusing on how PEOs specifically can help government contractors to stabilize their overhead costs. So I'll start with just a quick overview of what goes into a wrap rate for those that may be new to this or thinking about getting into the government space, an overview of really the value behind PEOs, why they're growing so fast, why there are close to 1,000 PEOs that are out there right now, what the typical setup looks like within most government contractors that are small or mid-sized, and then really how this impacts the income statement if you decide to partner with PEO. A little about myself. I've been working with government contractors for the past 6 years, been in the PEO market for the past 2, and advising companies within different aspects of HR for the past 8. First slide, please. Okay, so as I mentioned, a quick refresher here, right, on what goes into the wrap rate. And I think most of you are very familiar with this, but your overhead, such as things like travel, office supplies, what are the salaries within the workforce, your G&A costs. So these are going to be, what are you paying for indirect salaries, human resources, all of the multiple vendors that you may have for your back office services, your rent, and then your fringe. So benefit costs, company sponsored 401k plans, and then what's left over, simply your fee. And I think the idea is obviously to contain or get your fringe, your overhead, your G&A as low as you can so that you can maximize your profit while still being competitive. The next slide, please. So just starting out with a basic overview, PEO, that stands for Professional Employer Organizations. And really what they do, if you break down a one-on-one of what a PEO does, is it provides really an all-in-one back office solution for small and mid-sized companies. And this really ranges depending on the PEO, but most of them encompass benefits, your payroll, different aspects of HR, compensation or workers' comp, and then state unemployment. If you are to look at also the buying power or the economies of scale that PEOs provide, the idea behind this model, this concept is that instead of going to market, let's say you have 50 employees and you can go to a number of brokers, and the idea is that you're trying to shop and find the best rates. How do we put a competitive benefits package in place to make sure that we can retain our top talent, our employees, attract employees to our company, while at the same time being within the confines of your budget. So it's a matter of finding that balance. Many companies really don't have a lot of leverage when it comes to health benefits until they typically start getting to that 125, 150 employee range. They may have a little bit of influence on their rates, their renewals. What PEOs do is they are pooling companies together for economies of scale. So if you've ever purchased anything in mass, you know that if you buy 1 to 10 t-shirts, You may get them for $25. You start purchasing 500 t-shirts from the manufacturer, you know that cost is going to come down. And so, the same economies really apply to the PEO market when it comes to benefits. And not all PEOs are created equal or the same size, but it's common sense when you leverage more, you are typically going to get lower rates, which can bring your fringe down. And then it's just a matter of there's an administrative cost for most PEOs. So sometimes there's a net savings where you may pick up $50,000 in savings, let's say on your benefits. You're going to pay an administrative cost to your PEO. Sometimes that might come into a net savings. Sometimes that might be a cost neutral. And sometimes partnering with a PEO, it might be an investment. But let's look at some more of the specific value that PEO can provide. Next slide, please. Okay, so a PEO should really help from a strategic standpoint, should help organizations attract, motivate, retain employees. And we know that when employees are engaged, when employees are really motivated within your company, they are going to perform. And you obtain business one of two ways. It's either new revenue or it's repeat revenue. And if those employees are engaged, they're productive, they're going to complete their projects much faster or on time within budget, versus you have a revolving door. If there's a lot of attrition within your business, then that does cost overhead dollars. That can impact your state unemployment rate. And we'll dive into more of those specifics in future slides. But it also can help. PEOs are designed to help you with HR matters as well, and then lowering your HR related expenses. So just for time's sake, I'm going to go to the next slide and give you, this is the typical model where, regardless if you have 10 or 15 employees, or perhaps you have 500 employees, companies are either outsourcing these functions of their business, or they are managing them internally, or it's a combination of both. But when we look at HR, for example, and what they need to manage, or the personnel that you need to employ to manage these items, efficient company that's 100 employees, they may only need one person if they're partnering with a PEO, whereas some companies, if they're not partnering, they may need two people in this role. But the typical setup, if we were just walk through some basic examples here of just benefits administration, typically an organization will have anywhere from 2 to 3 different providers. Let's say for LTD, STD, and life, you have one carrier that you're working with. For your dental and your vision, you have another, and then your medical, you may have another. Every time there's an open enrollment process, every time there's a qualifying life event, or an employee leaves your organization, many small, mid-sized businesses, they don't necessarily have those connections built directly with their payroll system. A lot of these tasks are manual. Or if we look at the human resources aspect and you have an applicant tracking system, is the applicant tracking system feeding into your benefits? Is it feeding into your payroll? Or are you managing multiple vendors? Most organizations, they have 8 different line items related to this employee life cycle, from benefits to the workers' comp, all the things that you need to operate your back office. And most of the time, without bundling, those costs for these individual services tend to be higher versus grouping in these services together with one provider. So we go to the next slide. You can see that the better state, the more efficient state for a company is really to combine these solutions under one roof. And most PEOs have these main pillars, if you will. So most are going to combine the payroll, they're going to combine benefits and different aspects of human resource management. And this is where companies can pick up a lot of efficiency. When your human resources can offload 50% of their administrative load and they've freed up their time, that's an opportunity for them to focus on engagement. with employees. We know through studies that when you have an engaged workforce, your productivity of that workforce on average will go up between 15 to 22%. That can have a direct impact on your revenue. And we know that in a PEO solution, according to NAPEO, the National Association for PEOs, the average company that is on a PEO has 14% less turnover than companies that are not on a PEO. And much of the reason is because your HR department now partnering with a PEO can be much more strategic. We'll move on to the next slide. We can get more granular, as they said, with the income statement and what this really means. What specific line items can you expect a PEO partnership to impact on your P&L or on your WRAP rate? And if we look at a couple of examples here, let's just take wages, for example. Our unemployment nationally right now is at 3.5%. We look in the DC market. The other day I looked for Fairfax County, it's 1.9%. And so it can be very difficult when you're competing for contracts, you're up for a recompete, and you're trying to bring in the best talent, but talent is in the driver's seat today. They know that they have their choice of where they want to go, especially if they're cleared, especially if they're in cyber and they have the skill set. They know that it's a bid war. So how do you maintain that balance? How do you make sure that you're not overpaying your employees or underpaying your employees? And only 14% of companies today actually have benchmark data that they're leveraging and analytics that they are leveraging when they extend a job offer. So most PEOs can provide you with more guidance, more benchmarks on coming up with an intentional compensation package for your employees. One that's going to take into consideration the local market, their skill sets, different compensable factors, so that when you're making that job offer to an employee, you can be more intentional and also make sure that as you want to retain this employee, do you have the room to give them a merit increase or cost of living increase each year? If we look at benefits, this is really a main driver for a lot of companies, obviously exploring the PEO industry today. And this can go up on average in this market right now. The trend is about 9 to 10%. Sometimes companies will be in the single digits, and then they'll get a 15 or a 20, a 25% increase on their benefits. Well, if you're winning a 5-year contract and you only have 2 or 3% escalation, and you now receive on your second or third most expensive overhead item that you're going to get whacked with a 15 to 30% increase, you have 3 options, and that's either to pass the cost on to your employees. That's either to dig into the profits of your contract, or it's to simply adjust your plan designs, which means you could significantly devalue or de-rich the plans that you're offering your employees and risk turnover. So the idea behind a PEO is to not only provide you with those economies of scale and more negotiating powers with carriers, the idea is that they're also vetting the companies that come into a PEO. And if the due diligence is there, you're looking at each individual company that is invited into a PEO, because some companies are not allowed into a PEO. It just depends on that PEO's parameters. But the idea is that a PEO wants to build up a good book of business so that when they're negotiating with carriers, they have a healthy book, and you can maintain those single-digit renewals for the long term. If we look at workers' comp, you may have a riskier side of your business, and just as state unemployment is an experience rating, so is your workers' comp. If you're in the blue collar arena, you're keenly aware of how important it is to manage your EMR rate or your modification rate. And PEOs can really help you with developing a curriculum to make sure that you have a safe workforce, that you are mitigating accidents within your company. If you're on the manufacturing side of business, to make sure that you have programs in place, MDR programs in place, regular drug testing, really to avoid those accidents and maintain a good, clean record so that long term, your workers' comp, it's a stable cost, and hopefully each year that cost goes down. Really, you can just have one bad accident. And this happens in gray collar, it happens in white collar companies as well. It only takes one bad accident for you to really take your modification rate up several points, and that can have a significant impact on your overhead costs. If we look at employer taxes, your one controllable tax as an employer is your state unemployment tax rate. So most of the time when an employee claims unemployment, if you had to terminate that employee, that's an experience rate. In the state of Virginia, it's 2.57 is the new business rate. And over the years, if you have less claims, then your state unemployment rate should go down. Well, if your turnover goes down because you are an employer of choice, if your employees, you're hiring the right talent, you have the time to do that, and your HR department can focus there. If your wages are competitive and you have a great culture, then it should reflect in your state unemployment rate. And oftentimes those that, it's very telling when you work with a company and you see a very high unemployment rate. Maybe sometimes it's cyclical, it's part of their business, or it's seasonal and they need to lay off. But oftentimes this can be controlled. If you can reduce your turnover, then this can impact the rate as well. Next slide, please. Let's take a look at operating expenses, and in the same vein as compensation on the last slide here, indirect labor and burdens. PEOs can alleviate this as well. I gave the example earlier of a 100 employee company. Society for Human Resource Management tells us that the point where a company should have someone full-time for human resources is 100 employees. I think it really depends on the nature of your business. Sometimes there's companies that will have 2 or 3 personnel within the human resource department. Just depends on the nature of your business, the interaction with your employees. And PEOs aren't always necessarily intended to offset the complete cost. You still are going to need that person to head up your human resource department. Maybe instead of hiring someone with an overhead salary of 60 to 80,000, if you can bring in a PEO to provide you with tools, the resources, and best practices, they may be able to push out a second hire within the HR department to 150 or 200 employees versus having 2 people with 100. So again, I think that's really a case by case. There's no, no 2 companies are exactly alike. We look at vendors, coming back to what I mentioned earlier. Typically, you're alleviating, or you're going from 7 or 8 different vendors down to 1 or 2 vendors when you're working with PEO. So it's a much more streamlined approach to human resources and the employee life cycle. We look at technology. So instead of paying a la carte for services such as an applicant tracking system, learning management system, many PEOs will group this cost into the cost of their services. So instead of having to go out and pay a much higher amount for these a la carte services, most PEOs will wrap in the basic services that you need to manage that employee life cycle. And then materials can be decreased as well through paperless efforts, through mobile apps, things like that. Go on to the next slide. Just 2 left here. So this study came out about 2 months ago from the National Association of Professional Employer Organizations, and what they showed is that the average company that partners with the PEO can expect 27.2% return on investment, and the average annual savings per employee is about $1,775 according to their breakdown. So this, again, factors in many of the things that we've talked about, your HR salaries and benefits, the cost of health benefits being decreased, external expenditures, workers' comp, and that number is obviously going to be higher or more savings if you're in blue collar, or you have a gray collar kind of in between side of your business as well. And last slide, please. So the proof is really in the numbers, and there's a reason that PEOs are growing 16 times faster than the U.S. economy. As of a year and a half ago, there was 907 PEOs on the market. Today, I believe there's closer to 1,000, and it's proven that when you partner with a PEO, the revenues do increase significantly. If you have more time and you have more resources, if you're bringing down the resources that a Fortune 500 company can offer to your 10 employee business, your 50 employee business, that's really going to give you an edge over your competitors that are in your space. That can give you an edge when you are going through the recruitment process with your employees, and you can boast that you're partnered with a PEO and you're delivering that caliber of benefits. And they could potentially be looking at a larger company as well. So to be able to say that we have the same type of technology, and in today, when it's so important to make sure you have to be an exceptional employer because of unemployment where it's at, and the employee experience, it really starts with what is your marketing out there to the employee market? How do you market yourselves? What is your interview process like? And what is your onboarding process like? Those are your three first impressions in the employee experience, and they have to stand out today. PEOs will help you do this. And in doing this, if you are obtaining top talent and you're retaining them, your turnover is going to go down. You're going to see that reflect on your P&L. So hope this was helpful. If there's any questions, we'll go to the next slide. You can certainly feel free to email me. And I think that with many government contractors around the Beltway here, I think that there's oftentimes some myths that are out there, some concerns about partnering with a PEO. Those are some of the most common questions that come up. And if any of those have come up or are top of mind and you've been giving consideration to a PEO, certainly feel free to email me here, and we could also take a deeper look at how this can really impact wrap rates as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Caleb, for joining us today. Again, if you have any questions, you can email him with the email or call him at the phone number you see on your screen. And this concludes the webinar. Thank you, everybody.